The millionaire's daughter finds a little beggar girl inside her father's car and decides to take action. Desperate, the beggar girl screams, "Please take me with you, Daddy." When the millionaire hears this word, he is faced with a frightening scene that connects him to a dark past. What does this child know about him that he doesn't want to remember? If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Tell us which city you're watching us from and we'll keep going. The afternoon sun illuminated the busy streets of the capital's financial center. Lukas Müller, a successful 45-year-old businessman, looked out over the city from his office on the top floor of one of the city's most imposing buildings. The reflection in the glass showed a man with serious features, grey hair at the temples, and eyes that hid more stories than he cared to admit. "Mr. Müller, the meeting with investors is over. Your daughter is waiting in reception," announced Ingrid, his executive secretary. Lukas looked at his watch. He had promised his daughter that they would go out to buy what they needed for the trip they would take together at the weekend, an attempt to make up for the months of absence dedicated to business. "Thank you, Ingrid. Tell her I'll be right down," he replied, adjusting his tie and picking up his jacket, which was carefully folded on the chair. At the reception, Isabel Müller, a 16-year-old girl, waited impatiently. Her brown eyes, inherited from her mother, scanned the screen of her cell phone while her fingers frantically typed messages to her friends. "Hi, daughter. Sorry for the delay," Lukas said, approaching. Isabel looked up, a mixture of joy and resentment on her face. "I thought you had forgotten again," she replied, putting her cell phone in her bag. "I promised, didn't I? And this time no work calls or emergencies," he assured, with a smile he rarely displayed in his professional environment. As they left the building, Lukas didn't notice the curious glances that followed them. Among the reception staff, a young woman named Helena Schmidt was watching intently. At 27 years old, she had only been working at Lukas's company for 6 months as an administrative assistant. Her green eyes followed father and daughter until they disappeared through the revolving door. "Helena, have the week's reports been filed yet?" the supervisor asked, interrupting her thoughts. "Yes, sir. I just organized them," she replied, quickly returning to her professional demeanor. What no one knew was that Helena was keeping a secret that could change the Müllers' lives forever. She tucked her dark hair behind her ear and went back to work, her mind working out the next step in a carefully laid plan. At the luxury mall, Lukas and Isabel browsed the stores. The teenager tried on clothes and accessories for their weekend trip to the beach, while her father watched her with a mixture of admiration and sadness. She reminded him so much of her mother, Katarina, that sometimes it hurt to look at her. "What do you think of this dress, Dad?" Isabel asked, turning in front of the mirror. "You look beautiful," Lukas replied sincerely. "Your mother would love to see how you've grown." Isabel stopped smiling for a moment. Katarina had passed away when she was only 7 years old, after a long illness. Since then, the relationship between father and daughter had become a delicate balance between physical presence and emotional absence. "He doesn't talk about her much lately," Isabel commented, returning to the dressing room. Lukas sighed. Sometimes it's hard to talk about the past. While Isabel was changing, Lukas received a message on his cell phone. It was from an unknown number. "The past always comes back, Mr. Müller, and there are truths that cannot remain buried forever." His blood ran cold. Who could be sending such a message? Was it a competitor trying to destabilize him? Or was it something related to Katarina and the secrets he swore to keep? On the other side of the city, in a small apartment, Sophia Schmidt, a 10-year-old girl, watched the movement of the streets through the window. Her large, expressive eyes reflected an unusual maturity for her age. Beside her, her grandmother, Donna Aurora, organized the medicines she needed to take. "Grandma, do you think I'll ever meet my father?" Sophia asked, without taking her eyes off the window. The elderly lady stopped what she was doing, a tired sigh escaping her lips. "Fate has strange ways of bringing people together, my little one. Perhaps sooner than we think." Sophia smiled shyly. "Mommy said he was an important man." "Your mother had big dreams," Donna Aurora replied, avoiding going into details. Helena, her daughter, and Sophia's mother had told different stories about the girl's father over the years. The truth, however, was more complex than anyone could have imagined. Back at the mall, Lucas and Isabel were finishing their shopping when the businessman felt his cell phone vibrate again. Another message from the unknown number. "Look carefully at what is before your eyes, Lucas. Some treasures are closer than you think." Lucas looked around, feeling watched. Who was sending these cryptic messages, and why? "Are you okay, Dad?" Isabel asked, noticing her father's troubled expression. "Yeah, just a work message," he lied, putting his phone away. "How about that ice cream I promised?" As they walked toward the ice cream shop, Lucas couldn't help but feel that something was about to change in his carefully controlled life. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Helena was in her apartment, looking at an old photograph of her and Katerina, Lucas's deceased wife, smiling for the camera. "It's time to know the truth, Sophia," Helena murmured, touching her daughter's face as she entered the room. "It's time to meet your father." The plan was in motion. Soon, the paths of Lucas, Isabel, Helena, and Sophia would cross in ways none of them could have foreseen, unearthing long-kept secrets and rewriting everyone's fate. At the ice cream shop, while Isabel savored her chocolate ice cream, Lucas stared out the window, distracted. His world, built on what he believed to be solid foundations, was about to crumble. The weekend trip would not only be a moment of reconnection with his daughter, but the beginning of a journey that would forever change the meaning of family for all of them. Saturday morning arrived with the promise of typical summer heat in São Paulo. Lucas woke up early, frowning as he remembered the mysterious messages he had received the day before. After a restless night, he decided that he would not allow anonymous threats to ruin his trip with his daughter. While making coffee, he heard Isabel's footsteps coming down the mansion's stairs. "Good morning, Dad. Is everything ready to go?" she asked, excited about the prospect of a few days at the beach house. "Almost everything. We just need to load the car and we can go," Lucas replied, trying to hide the worry that was consuming him. In another part of the city, Helena helped Sophia organize a small backpack with her clothes. The girl, although curious about the trip, her mother had promised, seemed apprehensive. "Mommy, where are we going again?" Sophia asked, carefully folding a blouse. Helena hesitated, thinking about the best way to explain. For the past 10 years, she had raised her daughter alone, protecting her from the truth about her origins. But now, with Donna Aurora hospitalized and her financial resources increasingly scarce, she saw no other alternative. "We're going to meet an important person, dear. Someone who can help Grandma Aurora with the treatment she needs," Helena replied, avoiding her daughter's questioning gaze. What Helena didn't expect was that this journey would be much more complex than simply asking for financial help. There was a story buried in the past, a story that involved betrayal, love, and painful choices. Back at the Muller mansion, Lucas was finishing putting his bags in the trunk of his Range Rover when his cell phone vibrated again. Another message from the unknown number. "The truth about Katerina is on its way, Lucas. Get ready to see the fruits of your labor." Lucas felt his blood run cold. Katerina, the name of his late wife associated with those enigmatic messages, could not be a coincidence. Was it possible that someone knew the secret that he and Katerina had kept for so many years? "Dad, is everything okay? You look pale," Isabel observed, approaching with the last suitcase. "I'm fine, just worried about some work details," he lied, quickly putting his cell phone in his pocket. "Come on, traffic to Baixada Santista tends to be heavy on the weekends." As Lucas drove down the road, he couldn't stop thinking about the messages. His mind wandered back 10 years when his life seemed perfect. He and Katerina were at the height of their careers. He as a budding businessman, she as a humanitarian doctor. It was during one of Katerina's trips to a poor community that everything changed. "Dad, do you think Mom would like what we've become?" Isabel asked suddenly, breaking the silence in the car. The question took Lucas by surprise. "Why are you thinking about this now?" Isabel shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I get the feeling there are things about her you've never told me, like there's a part of her life that remains a mystery." Lucas gripped the steering wheel tightly. If Isabel knew how her words touched on a painful truth, Your mother was an extraordinary woman, Isabel, dedicated, compassionate, always willing to help others. But she was also complex. There were many sides to her that I myself took a while to understand. Like what? Insisted the teenager. Lucas sighed. Like her decision to work in underprivileged communities even though she knew the risks, or how she could see the best in people, even when I only saw the worst. What Lucas didn't say was that this ability to see the best in people had led Katarina to make decisions that changed the course of their lives forever. Meanwhile, on an intercity bus heading to the coast, Helena tried to calm an increasingly restless Sophia. "Mummy, you never talked much about my father. Is he the one we're going to see?" the girl asked, her big eyes fixed on her mother's tense face. Helena swallowed hard. How could she explain to a 10-year-old the complexity of adult relationships? How could she say that her father didn't know about her existence because Helena herself had chosen to keep it a secret, following an agreement made in the past? "Sophia, there are things about our family that are complicated. I promise I'll explain everything when the time is right," Helena replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "For now, I need you to trust me." The girl nodded, though her eyes showed that she was not completely satisfied with the answer. At the Miller's Beach House, an elegant mansion overlooking the sea, Lucas and Isabel were beginning to settle in. The housekeeper, Donna Eulalia, who looked after the place all year round, had prepared everything to welcome them. "Mr. Lucas, it's so good to see you again. And you, Isabel, are looking more and more like your mother every day," the lady commented, hugging the teenager. "Thank you, Donna Eulalia. I missed you and your rain cakes," Isabel replied, smiling. While Isabel went upstairs to leave her things in her room, Lucas called the housekeeper for a private conversation. "Mrs. Eulalia, have you received any strange visitors in the last few days? Or noticed anything out of the ordinary?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The housekeeper frowned. "No, Mr. Lucas, everything is as calm as ever. Why, did something happen?" "No, nothing important, just a silly concern," he said evasively. In the late afternoon, Lucas and Isabel were walking along the beach. The sea breeze brought some peace to the businessman's troubled heart as he watched his daughter run barefoot across the sand. "Dad, shall we go to dinner at that restaurant Mommy loved?" asked Isabel, returning from her run. Lucas smiled nostalgically. "Of course, I think it would be a nice way to honor her memory." What Lucas didn't know was that, at that exact moment, Helena and Sophia were disembarking at the coastal bus station. With an improvised map and the address of the Muller's Beach House written down on a crumpled piece of paper, Helena was preparing for the confrontation she had postponed for a decade. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Sophia complained. "Let's get something to eat and then we'll head to our destination," Helena replied, checking her watch. "We still have time." At the beachfront restaurant, Lucas and Isabel sat at a table overlooking the ocean. The place, decorated with elegant simplicity, was Katarina's favorite. "Dad, you never told me how you met Mom," Isabel commented as she examined the menu. Lucas smiled, drifting back into memories. "It was at a charity event. I was there representing my company, which had just donated to a health project in underprivileged communities. Your mother was one of the doctors in charge of the project." "Was it love at first sight?" Isabel asked, interested. "Not exactly," Lucas laughed. "In fact, we argued. She thought the money should go directly to buying medicine, while I argued that some of it should be used for awareness campaigns. By the end of the night, we were having coffee together and discussing how important both approaches were." What Lucas failed to mention was that their discussion had revealed something fundamental about Katarina, her passion for social justice, and her determination to do what she believed was right, even when it meant defying powerful people. As they enjoyed dinner, Lucas could not imagine that just a few kilometers away, Helena was looking at an old photograph where she and Katarina were smiling side by side, wearing white lab coats. The photo had a dedication. "To Helena, my friend and partner in the battles for life. With love, Katarina." The truth that was about to come to light was more complex than anyone could have imagined, and with it would come a revelation that would forever change the definition of family for the Mullers. The next morning dawned with an intense blue sky over the coast of São Paulo. Lucas woke up to the sound of waves crashing on the beach and the aroma of fresh coffee prepared by Dona Eulalia. He had slept badly, tormented by dreams in which Catarina appeared trying to tell him something important, something he could not understand. When he went down to the kitchen, he found Isabel already sitting at the table on the balcony, devouring a slice of orange cake while leafing through a magazine. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she joked. "I thought we were going to spend the whole day at the beach." Lucas smiled, pouring himself some coffee. "Let's go, I just needed to catch up on some lost sleep." "Nightmares again?" Isabel asked, more perceptive than her father would have liked. Lucas hesitated. Since losing Catarina, he had occasionally suffered from sleepless nights, something his daughter had noticed over the years. Nothing major, just confusing dreams. Not far away, in a small seaside inn, Helena was combing Sophia's hair while the girl ate her breakfast. Helena's nervousness was palpable, reflected in her trembling hands and distant gaze. "Mommy, you've been acting strange since yesterday," Sophia observed, always aware of her mother's mood swings. "Is it because of this person we're going to visit?" Helena tucked a lock of her daughter's hair behind her ear in a loving gesture. "Yes, dear, it's a very important visit, and I'm just a little nervous, that's all." What Helena didn't say was that she was about to confront the man who, unbeknownst to her, was Sophia's father. The man who had been the husband of her best friend, Catarina. The man whose life she had avoided disturbing for 10 long years until circumstances forced her to make a drastic decision. On the beach in front of the Müller house, Lucas and Isabel were enjoying the morning sun. The teenager was running through the water while her father watched from afar, sitting under an umbrella. His cell phone vibrated again, showing a new message from the unknown number. "Look around you, Lucas. The past is closer than you think." Alarmed, Lucas stood up quickly, scanning the beach. There were several families enjoying the sunny day, couples walking on the sand, children playing in the water. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Could it be possible that the sender of the messages was nearby, watching him? "Dad, come swim with me," Isabel shouted from the water. Trying to hide his concern, Lucas forced a smile and walked to the edge of the sea. "Is it cold?" he asked, touching the water with his foot. "Don't be scared," Isabel teased, throwing water at him. For a moment, Lucas allowed himself to forget about the disturbing messages and dove into the waves with his daughter, like in the old days, when Catarina was still alive, and the three of them formed a seemingly perfect family. Meanwhile, Helena and Sophia were walking along the beach, heading towards the Müller house. Helena had explained to her daughter that they needed to speak to an important man who could help them, but without revealing the true nature of the visit. "Is that the house over there, Mom?" Sophia asked, pointing to the imposing mansion by the sea. Helena felt her heart race. "Yes, it's there." As they got closer, Helena saw two figures playing in the water. She immediately recognized Lucas, even after 10 years. And the teenager could only be Isabel, who was only 6 years old when Helena saw her for the last time at Catarina's funeral. "Who are they?" Sophia asked, watching father and daughter play in the waves. "The man is Mr. Müller, the person we need to speak to," Helena replied, feeling her throat dry. "And that is his daughter, Isabel." Sophia watched curiously. "She looks like fun." Helena smiled sadly. "Yes, she must be. Let's wait for them to come out of the water." As they waited a few meters away, Helena reflected on how they had come to be here. Her friendship with Catarina had begun in medical school, where they shared dreams and ideals. After graduation, Catarina married Lucas, a promising young businessman, while Helena dedicated herself to working on humanitarian projects alongside her friend. Fate, however, had drawn a tortuous path for the two. During a mission in a poor community, when Catarina had already been married for a few years and had little Isabel, an event occurred that would change their lives forever. Helena never imagined that that period would result in the birth of Sophia, or that she would have to raise her daughter alone, carrying a secret that could destroy the memory of her dearest friend. Lucas and Isabel finally emerged from the water, laughing and chatting animatedly. It was then that Lucas noticed the two figures standing on the sand watching them. Something about the woman's posture seemed vaguely familiar to him, but he couldn't place where he knew her from. "Dad, there's someone watching us," Isabel commented, also noticing the observers. Lucas frowned, a chill running down his spine as he remembered the threatening messages. "Stay here, I'll see who it is." Walking toward the two, Lucas felt a strange sense of déjà vu. As he got closer, the woman became clearer. Dark hair, intense green eyes, a determined expression on her face, and at her side, a girl who looked to be about the age Isabel had been when Katarina left. "Lucas Müller?" Helena asked, her voice trembling but firm. "Yes, it's me." "Have we met?" he replied, studying the woman's face cautiously. Helena took a deep breath. "My name is Helena. Schmidt was friends with Katarina in medical school. We worked together on humanitarian projects." Recognition struck Lucas like a bolt of lightning. Helena Schmidt. The name Katarina had mentioned so often. The friend who had mysteriously disappeared. After the funeral, leaving no trace. "Helena, yes, I remember you. You disappeared after Katarina," he hesitated, glancing quickly at the girl beside her. "After Katarina left us." "I had my reasons," Helena replied enigmatically. "We need to talk, Lucas, in private." Lucas looked at Sophia, noticing how the girl observed everything with curious and intelligent eyes. There was something familiar in that look, something he couldn't quite identify. "Who are you?" asked Isabel, who had approached stealthily against her father's instructions. "I'm Sophia," the girl replied, extending her hand politely. "And you must be Isabel." Isabel gave her father a questioning look before shaking the girl's hand. "How do you know my name?" "My mother told me," Sophia explained. "She knew your mother." A heavy silence fell over the group. Lucas, sensing that something important was about to be revealed, suggested that they continue the conversation in the house. Donna Eulalia prepared fresh lemonade. "Isabel, why don't you and Sophia go ahead while Helena and I talk a little?" The girls, curious but obedient, walked towards the house. When they were a safe distance away, Lucas looked at Helena. "Are you the one who's been sending the messages?" he asked, his tone wavering between anger and fear. "Messages? I don't know what you're talking about," Helena replied genuinely, confused. Lucas studied her face, concluding that she was speaking the truth. "Then why are you here after all these years? And who is this girl?" Helena looked out to sea, gathering her courage. "I came because I need your help, Lucas. My mother is sick, needing expensive treatments, and I can't afford them." "And why would I help?" Lucas asked, his expression hardening. Helena turned her gaze to him, her green eyes shining with determination. "Because Sophia is your daughter." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He staggered back in disbelief. "That's impossible. We never had. Katarina and I were—" "It's not what you think," Helena interrupted, her voice low and strained. "Sophia was not conceived in the traditional way. She is the result of the project Katarina and I worked on together. A project you funded but whose full details you never knew." Lucas felt the world spin around him. The implications of what Helena was saying were immeasurable. "Explain yourself better," he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "We will, but not here," Helena replied, looking at the house where the girls had entered. "There is much more to this story than you imagine, Lucas. And believe me, this truth will forever change the way you think about Katarina and about yourself." As they walked in silence toward the house, Lucas felt as if he were walking toward the epicenter of an earthquake that was about to destroy all his certainties. The girl, Sophia, his daughter. How could that be possible? And what mysterious project was this that Katarina and Helena were developing? On the porch of the house, Isabel and Sophia were chatting animatedly, as if they were old friends who had just met again. Lucas observed the two side by side, and for the first time noticed an unsettling similarity. Sophia's smile was identical to Katarina's. In the spacious living room of the beach house, a tense silence hung in the air. Donna Eulalia had served lemonade and cookies to the girls before discreetly retiring to the kitchen, sensing that something important was happening. "Isabel, why don't you and Sophia show us your shell collection?" Lucas suggested, trying to create a private moment for the conversation with Helena. Isabel, sensing the tension in the air, nodded. "Come, Sophia, I have an incredible collection upstairs." As soon as the girls went upstairs, Lucas turned to Helena, his face a mask of disbelief and restraint. "Now explain everything to me, and don't you dare lie," he demanded, keeping his voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. Helena sat on the couch, her hands clasped together in her lap in a nervous gesture. "Where to begin? Do you remember the humanitarian projects that Katerina coordinated in needy communities?" "Of course. I funded many of them through the founding of the company," Lucas replied, remaining standing. "What you didn't know is that, in addition to basic medical care, Katerina had a special project, something she kept secret even from you." Helena took a deep breath before continuing. "She was developing an assisted fertilization program for low-income women who couldn't have children." Lucas frowned. "And what does that have to do with Sophia supposedly being my daughter?" Katerina discovered she had a rare condition that would prevent her from having any more children. After Isabel, Helena revealed, she was devastated, especially as she knew how much you wanted a second child. Helena's words hit Lucas like a punch in the stomach. It was true that he and Katerina had talked about expanding their family, but after Isabel's birth, the topic had gradually been dropped. "Katerina never told me about this condition," he muttered, finally sitting up, his legs feeling unable to support him. "She didn't want to worry you or make you feel guilty about wanting more children," Helena explained. "Instead, she came to me with an unusual proposal." Lucas looked deeply into Helena's eyes, fearing what would come next. "What proposal?" "She suggested I be a surrogate mother, using your genetic material and hers." Helena hesitated, the words heavy in her mouth. "Katerina had access to the sperm bank where you had made a deposit before a risky surgery you had years ago, remember?" Lucas's blood ran cold. Yes, he remembered. A heart procedure he had undergone at age 35, when doctors had recommended he preserve his genetic material as a precaution. That's unethical. Illegal," he exclaimed, standing up again, disturbed. "I know," Helena agreed, her eyes brimming with tears. "And that's exactly what I told her. But Katerina was determined. She argued that it would be a way to continue the Miller family, even with her physical limitations." "And you agreed?" Lucas asked in disbelief. Helena looked down. "Not right away. I resisted for months, but Katerina was persuasive, you know that. She had this gift for convincing people to do what she believed was right." Lucas ran his hands through his hair, trying to absorb the magnitude of what he was hearing. "So, you're saying that Sophia is biologically your and Katerina's daughter," Helena added. "I was just the carrier." "My God," Lucas whispered, leaning back on the couch. "And when did this happen?" "Shortly before Katerina became seriously ill," Helena replied. "Sophia was early in her pregnancy when we learned of Katerina's terminal diagnosis. It was devastating." Lucas remembered those dark days, the way Katerina seemed to be fighting something more than just the illness that consumed her. There was a secret in her eyes, something he could never decipher. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "She planned to tell me everything when I was in my second trimester, but then her condition quickly worsened," Helena explained, wiping away a tear. "At her bedside, she made me promise two things: that I would care for Sophia as my own daughter, and that I would never reveal the truth to you or Isabel unless it was absolutely necessary." "And now is it necessary?" Lucas asked, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. Helena nodded slowly. "My mother has a serious heart condition. The treatments are expensive, and I can't afford them alone. Besides, Sophia has the right to know her origins, her true family." Upstairs, while this conversation was taking place, Isabel was proudly showing Sophia her shell collection. "I picked this one up the last time we came to the beach with my dad," she explained, holding up a delicate pink shell. Sophia watched everything with curious eyes. "Your house is beautiful. You must love coming here." "It's nice, but I get a little lonely sometimes. My dad always brings work, even when he promises he won't do it," Isabel confided, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I also feel lonely sometimes," Sophia admitted. "My mum works a lot and my grandmother is sick." Isabel looked at the girl with renewed interest. "You never knew your father?" Sophia shook her head. "Mom never talks about him much. She just says he was a special man." A comfortable silence settled between the two, as if they shared a mutual understanding that transcended words. There was something familiar about Sophia that Isabel couldn't explain, an instant connection that felt natural and inexplicable. Then at the same time, "Do you want to see pictures of my mother?" Isabel asked suddenly, pulling an album from the drawer of the bedside table. "Of course," Sophia replied, coming closer. Isabel opened the album to a page that showed a beautiful woman with brown hair and a radiant smile holding a baby Isabel in her arms. "She was beautiful," Sophia commented, gently touching the photograph. "Yes, it was," Isabel agreed with a melancholy sigh. "Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. It scares me." "My grandmother says that the people we love never completely leave," Sophia offered. "They live on in little ways, like the shape of a smile or the way they laugh." Isabel looked at Sophia in surprise. For a 10-year-old girl, she seemed to possess wisdom beyond her years. As she turned the pages of the album, Isabel stopped at a photograph showing Katerina next to another woman, both wearing white lab coats and smiling at the camera. "Wait, isn't that your mother?" Isabel asked, pointing to the woman next to Katerina. Sophia stepped closer, her eyes widening in recognition. "Yes, it's Mommy. Younger, but it's her." Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. So they really knew each other. They were friends. "It looks like they were pretty close," Sophia observed, studying the photograph carefully. At that moment, something changed between the girls. An invisible bond seemed to form, connecting them through a shared past that they were only just beginning to discover. Back. In the room, Lucas digested Helena's revelations. His world turned upside down. "Why now?" he asked finally. "After 10 years, why show up now?" "As I said, my mother is sick," Helena repeated. "But there's more. I recently discovered something in Katerina's old files, something she was researching before she got sick." Lucas leaned forward, suddenly alert. "What files? What research?" "Lucas, did you know that Katerina's medical condition was unnatural?" Helena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" "No, the doctors said it was a rare condition, but—" "They said that because that was what they believed at the time," Helena interrupted. "But Katerina suspected something different. She believed her illness was related to exposure to toxic substances during our humanitarian work, in an area where her company had recently set up a factory." Lucas paled. "Are you insinuating that my company was responsible for Katerina's illness?" "I'm not insinuating anything," Helena replied firmly. "I'm saying that Katerina began investigating this possibility, and that shortly after she began that investigation, she quickly fell ill. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think?" The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the girl's footsteps coming down the stairs. Lucas and Helena exchanged tense glances, knowing that the conversation would need to be continued later. "Dad!" Isabel called, entering the room with Sophia right behind her. "Look what we found!" She held the photo album open to the page that showed Katerina and Helena together. Lucas picked up the album, his eyes moving from the photo to Helena and then to the two girls standing side by side. For the first time, he noticed the similarities, the shape of Sophia's eyes identical to his own, her smile a perfect replica of Katerina's. "They were friends," Isabel explained excitedly. "Sophia's mother and our mother worked together." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. Yes, they were very close. "Dad, can we take Sophia and Aunt Helena to get ice cream on the shore?" Isabel asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Unable to deny his daughter anything at that moment, Lucas nodded mechanically. "Sure, why not?" As the girls celebrated, he and Helena exchanged meaningful glances. The conversation was not over. In fact, it was only the beginning of even deeper revelations that threatened to completely redraw the map of their lives. And somewhere in the city, the sender of the mysterious messages watched the events unfold, preparing for the next move, in a game Lucas did not yet fully understand. The ice cream shop on the city's waterfront was packed with families enjoying their Sunday afternoon. Lucas watched Isabel and Sophia, who behaved as if they were longtime friends, sharing laughs and secrets, unaware of the whirlwind of revelations that had transformed the adult world around them. They hit it off quickly, Helena commented, sitting next to Lucas at a table away from where they could keep an eye on the girls at the counter, choosing ice cream flavors. Children have this ability to connect immediately that we lose as we age, Lucas replied, his voice distant, still processing everything he had discovered in the last few hours. Lucas's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. Another message from the unknown number. The truth never comes alone, Lucas. There are more secrets buried in the past. Ask about Project Genesis. Lucas visibly stiffened, which did not go unnoticed by Helena. What's wrong? She asked. Without answering, Lucas showed the message on his cell phone screen. Helena's eyes widened in shock. How could anyone know about this? She muttered, turning pale. So there really is a Genesis project? Lucas asked, his voice low and strained. I thought the messages were just to scare me or extort money. Helena glanced nervously at the girls, making sure they were far enough away that they wouldn't be overheard. Project Genesis was Katarina's code name for fertility research, the project that resulted in Sophia. Who else knew about this? Just me, Katarina, and a doctor who helped us, Dr. Mauricio Fontes, Helena replied. And he what? Lucas pressed. She mysteriously disappeared a few weeks after Katarina was admitted, Helena added, her voice barely above a whisper. At the time, I thought it was a coincidence, but now... Lucas ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. Are you suggesting that someone wanted to silence Katarina and the doctor because of this research, or because of the investigation into environmental contamination? I don't know for sure, but there's something bigger going on, Helena replied. That's why I kept Sophia away from all this for all these years. I was afraid that if the truth came out, she might be in danger too. And now you bring her directly to me, Lucas asked incredulously. If what you say is true, doesn't that put her at risk? Helena looked down. My mother is dying, Lucas. I have no other options. Besides, maybe together we can find out what really happened and protect our daughters. The word "our" hung in the air between them, full of unspoken meaning. Lucas glanced at Sophia, who was laughing at something Isabel had said. It was undeniable now. He could see traces of himself. And Katarina in the girl. We need to find out who's sending these messages, Lucas decided. And we need to continue this conversation in private. There are things the girls shouldn't hear yet. The girls returned to the table, carrying colorful ice cream cones. Look, Dad, Sophia likes the same flavors as me, exclaimed Isabel, excited. Lucas forced a smile. What a coincidence. It's no coincidence, Sophia corrected with wisdom beyond her years. Mom says tastes are inherited, like the color of your eyes or the shape of your nose. Lucas and Helena exchanged tense glances. Sophia's innocent observation held more truth than the girl could have imagined. Sophia, your mother is right, Lucas agreed, studying the girl's face with new eyes, now recognizing subtle features that had previously gone unnoticed. When they finished their ice cream, they decided to walk along the shore. The girls ran ahead while Lucas and Helena followed a few steps behind. What do you want from me exactly? Lucas asked, finally confronting the practical issue. Financial help for my mother's treatment for starters, Helena replied. And recognition. Recognition. Sophia deserves to know who her biological father is, Helena explained. I'm not asking you to publicly come out as the father or for it to change your life. I'm just asking you not to deny her the right to know her origins when she's ready to know. Lucas thought about the request. It was fair considering the circumstances, but the implications were enormous. How would Isabel react to discovering she had a half-sister? How would the press cover this family scandal involving one of the country's most prominent businessmen? "What about Katarina's suspicions about my company?" Lucas asked. "Do you have any evidence that there is a connection between our operations and her illness?" Helena shook her head. "Nothing concrete, just research notes she left, correlating the onset of symptoms with visits to communities near the factory." "I need to see those notes," Lucas insisted. "If there's any possibility that my company is causing harm to people's health, I need to know." "They're kept in a safe place in the capital," Helena explained. "I can show them to you when we get back." The conversation was interrupted by the cheerful sound of the girls who had found a small starfish in the sand. "Dad, look what we found," Isabel shouted, running towards them, followed by Sophia. Lucas bent down to examine the little sea treasure in his daughter's hand. "It's a beautiful starfish, but remember, we need to get it back into the water." "I know," Isabel replied, rolling, her eyes as only a teenager can do. "I'm not a kid anymore, Dad." The comment brought a smile to Lucas's face. His little girl was growing up so fast, and now he discovered he had another daughter who had lost 10 years of his life. "Sophia, would you like to do the honors?" Lucas asked, surprising everyone, including himself, with the offer. The girl's eyes lit up. "Can I really?" "Of course," he replied, feeling a strange warmth in his chest when he saw the girl's smile. Sophia carefully picked up the starfish and, with Isabel at her side, walked to the water's edge. Together, they returned, the creature to the sea, watching it disappear into the gentle waves. Helena watched the scene with a heavy heart. "They look like sisters," she commented softly. "They're sisters," Lucas replied, the reality of that statement finally settling into his consciousness. Back at the beach house, Donna Eulalia prepared dinner while the girls watched a movie in the living room. Lucas and Helena retired to the office, where they could continue their conversation away from prying ears. "There's something I haven't told you," Helena began as soon as the door closed behind them. "About the mysterious messages you received." Lucas, who was examining Katarina's documents stored in an old folder, looked up. "What?" "I also received similar messages," Helena confessed. "About 3 weeks ago. It was one of the reasons I decided to look for him." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Lucas asked, irritated. Helena bit her lip. "Because I thought it might be you trying to scare me into revealing the truth about Sophia." "And now?" "Now I know it's not you," she replied, "which means there's a third person who knows our secret. Someone who was close enough to Katarina to know about Project Genesis." Lucas thought for a moment. "You mentioned a doctor who disappeared, Dr. Mauricio. What if he didn't really disappear? What if he's been watching from afar all these years?" "But why?" Helena asked. "Why wait 10 years to make contact?" "Maybe he found something in Katarina's research," Lucas speculated. "Something related to the contamination or the fertility project that represents a threat or an opportunity." Helena looked skeptical. "Mauricio was a man of integrity, dedicated to science and the well-being of his patients. I can't imagine him playing a game of manipulation like this." "People change," Lucas observed, "especially when there's a lot of money or power involved." The conversation was interrupted by a light knock on the door. It was Isabel. "Dad, Sophia and I were thinking about making popcorn. Can we use the popcorn maker?" "Sure, dear," Lucas replied, trying to sound normal. "Ask Donna Eulalia to help you." Isabel hesitated in the doorway, her curious gaze shifting from Lucas to Helena. "You two are hiding something, aren't you?" "Why do you say that?" Lucas asked, trying to sound casual. "You two talk in private and stop when we approach," Isabel replied, crossing her arms. "And you have that wrinkle on your forehead that appears when you are worried about something important." Lucas looked at Helena, seeking help. How could he explain to a 16-year-old teenager the complex web of secrets that had been revealed into the last few hours? "Isabel," Helena began softly, "there are things from the past that your father and I need to resolve, things related to your mother and the work we did together." Does Sophia have anything to do with this? Isabel asked. Directly, because she told me she never knew her father, and now you two are acting strange after she and Aunt Helena showed up. Lucas was proud of his daughter's insight, even if it made the situation more complicated. Isabel, I promise we'll explain everything that's happening, but we need a little more time to organize our thoughts, okay? Isabel didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded. Okay, but don't treat me like a child. I hate it when you do that. I promise we won't do that, Lucas assured. When Isabel left, Helena looked at Lucas with concern. She's too perceptive for her own good. It always has been, Lucas agreed with a sigh. Ever since she was little, we haven't been able to hide anything from her. Katerina used to say she was born with a built-in lie detector. The mention of Katerina's name brought a momentary silence between them. What are we going to do now? Helena finally asked. Lucas thought for a moment. First, we need to find out who is sending these messages. Then we need to access Katerina's research on environmental contamination. If there is any truth to this, I need to know. What about the girls? Helena asked. Let's keep them safe, away from all this, until we figure out what's going on. Lucas decided. As for Sophia, I'll help with her mother's treatment regardless of what we find out. Helena looked relieved. What about paternity? Lucas looked out the window, watching the sea in the distance. I need time to process all of this, but I won't deny my responsibilities, whatever they may be. Lucas's phone vibrated again. Hesitantly, he checked the message. Time is a luxury you don't have. Katerina's secret is about to come to light. Find the flash drive. It explains everything. Lucas showed the message to Helena, whose expression turned to shock. What flash drive? She whispered. You don't know? Lucas asked, studying her face. Helena shook her head, genuinely confused. Katerina never mentioned any flash drives to me. At that moment, Helena's phone also vibrated. She checked the message, her face losing all color. It's hidden where it all began. Go back to the beginning before it's too late. The two looked at each other, the same silent question hovering between them. Who was playing this macabre game? And what really happened to Katerina? The decision to return to the capital was made during breakfast the next day. Lucas and Helena agreed that they needed to investigate the clues sent by the mysterious sender of the messages. But Dad, you promised we would stay here all week, protested Isabel, visibly disappointed. I know, dear, and I'm sorry, Lucas replied, feeling the weight of guilt. An urgent matter has come up at work that I need to take care of personally. Always the same excuse, Isabel muttered, abandoning her half-eaten plate of fruit and leaving the table. Sophia, who had been watching the scene in silence, turned to her mother. Are we going back too, Mummy? Helena exchanged a quick glance with Lucas before answering. Yes, dear, we need to check on Grandma Aurora. The truth, which both avoided telling the girls, was that the message back to the beginning had been interpreted as a direction to the hospital where Katerina worked, the place where it all began, the Humanitarian Medical Institute, in the Villa Mariana neighborhood, in the capital. While they were packing their bags, Lucas received a call from Ingrid, his secretary. Mr. Muller, I'm sorry to interrupt your rest, but there's something strange going on in the office, she said, her voice shaking. What's wrong, Ingrid? He asked, suddenly alert. Someone broke into your office over the weekend. The security systems were disabled and the electronic lock was bypassed. It doesn't appear to have been a common burglary. The only thing that was touched was your personnel file. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. The personnel file contained documents related to Katerina, including her medical history, and details about the funding for the humanitarian projects she coordinated. Someone is looking for the same information we are, Lucas told Helena, after hanging up the phone and reporting what had happened. That can't be a coincidence, Helena replied, her face pale. I think we should seek help. Maybe the police. And say what exactly? Lucas interrupted. That we suspect Katerina's death may be linked to a conspiracy involving environmental contamination and unauthorized fertility experiments. Without concrete proof, we'll look crazy. Helena bit her lip, recognizing the truth in his words. So what do we do? We followed the advice in the messages. We went back to the beginning and looked for that flash drive, Lucas decided. But first, I need to make sure the girls are safe. The solution came in the form of Donna Eulalia, who agreed to stay with the girls at the beach house for 2 more days, under the pretext that Lucas and Helena needed to resolve urgent matters in the capital. Don't worry, Mr. Lucas, I'll take good care of them, the loyal housekeeper assured. No one will know they're here alone with me. Isabel, still resentful of the change of plans, barely said goodbye to her father when he and Helena left early in the afternoon. She'll get over it, Helena said, noticing Lucas's dejected expression as they drove back to the capital. Teenagers tend to dramatize everything. It's not just that, Lucas replied, his eyes fixed on the road. I'm worried about their safety. If someone is really looking into Katerina's past and if they had access to my office, what's to stop them from finding out about our trip to the coast too? The heavy silence that followed confirmed that Helena shared the same concern. I called my security chief, Lucas continued after a few minutes. He's sending 2 trusted men to surveil the house discreetly, without the girls noticing. Helena nodded, visibly relieved. Good idea. As the car drove through Serra do Mar, Helena opened her bag and took out a small notebook. I found this among Katerina's things after she left, she explained, handing the notebook to Lucas, who shook, his head keeping his hands on the steering wheel. I need to focus on the road. Can you read to me? Helena leafed through the yellowed pages. It's mostly patient notes, case studies, test results, but there's a section at the back devoted to what she called statistical anomalies. What kind of anomalies? Lucas asked, intrigued. She documented an unexplained increase in cases of autoimmune diseases and cancer in specific communities, Helena explained, scanning the pages with her eyes, all located within a 5-kilometer radius of the Mueller Industries chemical processing plant in Cubatão. Lucas felt his stomach sink. The Cubatão plant had been one of his father, Roberto Mueller's first major investments. More than 3 decades ago, Lucas had taken over its management after his father retired, implementing what he believed to be rigorous environmental controls. This doesn't make sense, he protested. The plant has undergone regular inspections by CTSB. We have never had a single violation of environmental standards. Helena continued reading. Katerina suspected that the factory's effluents could contain chemical compounds that had not been tested by regulatory agencies, substances that were contaminating the water table. Why didn't she ever tell me about these suspicions? Lucas asked, a mixture of hurt and indignation in his voice. Helena closed the notebook hesitantly. She tried, Lucas, but you were so busy defending your father's legacy and expanding the business that, well, she decided to investigate on her own before confronting you with hard evidence. Helena's words were like a punch in the stomach for Lucas. It was true that, at that time, he was obsessed with proving his worth as the successor to Roberto Mueller, a man who had built a business empire from scratch. If this is true, if the factory really is contaminating the surrounding communities, Lucas was unable to finish the sentence. The weight of his family's company's possible responsibility for countless human suffering was overwhelming. That's why we need to find that flash drive, Helena said, placing a comforting hand on Lucas's shoulder. We need to know the truth, whatever it may be. When they arrived in the capital, it was already night. Lucas suggested that they first stop by his office to see what had been moved. Helena agreed, eager to begin the investigation. The Mueller Industries building, a glass skyscraper in the heart of the capital's financial center, was virtually empty at that hour, except for security guards and a few dedicated employees working late. Mr. Mueller, we didn't expect to see you today, the reception security guard commented, surprised. I came to pick up some documents, Lucas replied casually. This is Dr. Helena Schmidt, a medical consultant for our new social responsibility project. Helena nodded politely, impressed by how easily Lucas had improvised an excuse. In the exclusive elevator that took you directly to the penthouse where Lucas's office was, Helena asked, New social responsibility project? A convenient lie, Lucas replied bluntly. But maybe not a bad idea depending on what we find out. Lucas's office took up half the floor with panoramic views of the city. An imposing dark wood desk dominated the space, flanked by shelves filled with books and a gallery of photographs, showing Lucas with politicians, businessmen, and celebrities. Ingrid said someone's tampered with her personnel file, Lucas murmured, heading for a cabinet built into the wall opposite the desk. He punched a combination into the keypad, and the door slid silently open, revealing rows of meticulously organized folders. Odd, he commented, after briefly examining the contents. Nothing seems to be missing. The folders are all here, including Katerina's medical file. Maybe they didn't find what they were looking for, Helena suggested, approaching to examine the folders. Lucas frowned. Or maybe they just photographed the documents without removing them. As they were examining the contents of the file, Lucas's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" he answered hesitantly. "The flash drive isn't there," said an electronically distorted voice. Katerina was smarter than that. Look for where it all really began, where lives were created and destroyed. The call ended abruptly, leaving Lucas stunned. "Who was it?" Helena asked, worried about Lucas's pale expression. "Our mysterious informant," he replied, recounting the brief exchange. "Where life was created and destroyed, that can only mean the Institute's laboratory, where Katerina conducted her research." Helena nodded, considering. "That makes sense. The lab would be where Project Genesis was developed." "Can you get in there at this time?" Lucas asked, checking his watch, which read 10:37 p.m. "I still have my old badge," Helena replied. "And I know the night guards. You could say I'm picking up patient results for an emergency case." On the way to the Humanitarian Medical Institute, Lucas called Donna Eulalia to check on the girls. "They're fine, Mr. Lucas," the housekeeper assured him. "They had a good dinner and are now watching a movie before bed." "Great," Lucas replied, relieved. "Remember, don't open the door for anyone other than me or your security men." "You can rest assured, sir." After hanging up, Lucas noticed Helena's thoughtful look. "What's wrong?" "I've been thinking, what if the flash drive isn't in the lab?" she asked. "What if where it all began is a reference to something more personal?" Lucas considered the possibility. "Like what?" "Like the place where you and Katerina met, the charity event you mentioned at the restaurant." Lucas's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The New Life Foundation Benefit Gala, that's where we met." "Exactly," Helena confirmed. "And do you know who the president of the foundation is?" "Regina Hoffman, Katerina's best friend since childhood." Lucas had never considered this connection before. Regina, a discreet socialite and dedicated philanthropist, had been a constant presence in Katerina's life, even after her illness. "Do you think Katerina might have entrusted the flash drive to Regina?" he asked, considering the possibility. "It's a theory," Helena replied cautiously. "But first, let's check the lab. It's the most obvious place, and we need to rule out the most obvious options before pursuing alternative theories." When they arrived at the Humanitarian Medical Institute, the imposing modernist building was partially lit, with only the emergency wing fully functioning. Helena led Lucas to the side. Entrance, reserved for employees. "Good evening, Dr. Helena," greeted the elderly security guard at the entrance, visibly surprised. "It's been a long time since we've seen you around here." "Good evening, Mr. Eric," Helena replied with a warm smile. "I had to step away for a while, but I still have patients who depend on me. This is Dr. Müller, a colleague who is helping me with a special case." The security guard nodded, without questioning their presence at that hour. The respect and trust that Helena inspired were enough to guarantee entry. As they walked through the silent corridors of the hospital to the annex where the research laboratories were located, Lucas couldn't help but notice how comfortable Helena seemed in that environment, greeting the nurses and doctors on duty as if she had never left. "Do you miss this place?" he asked, noticing the nostalgic expression on her face. Helena smiled wistfully. "Every day. But when Katerina got sick and then Sophia was born, Well, I had to make choices. In the laboratory, a large space divided into several workstations. Helena headed straight to what had been Katerina's research site. Surprising that they kept it all pretty much intact, she said, running her fingers over the surface of the counter. After all this time, the Institute received substantial donations from the Müller Foundation, Lucas explained. One of the conditions I set was the preservation of Katerina's scientific legacy. Helena looked at him with newfound respect. Even with all the recent revelations, it was clear that Lucas had genuinely loved Katerina and respected her work. Where do we start? Lucas asked, looking around the organized environment full of sophisticated equipment. In the least obvious place, Helena replied. Heading to a bookshelf with dozens of scientific books, Katerina always hid her most important discoveries in plain sight. After minutes of searching, Helena pulled a specific book from the shelf. Advanced Genetics, Ethical Perspectives, a heavy volume that she was familiar with. She opened it, revealing that the inside pages had been cut out, forming a secret compartment. But the compartment was empty. Someone got there before us, Helena whispered, disappointment evident in her voice. At that moment, Lucas's cell phone vibrated with a new message. Hot, but not hot enough. The flash drive was never there. Look at the dedication in the book. Exchanging alarmed glances, Lucas and Helena scanned the first page of the book, where a handwritten dedication read, "To see, who always finds light where others see only shadows. The true treasure is kept where our hearts first met. R.M." R.M., Lucas murmured. Regina Hoffman. The pen drive is with Regina, concluded Helena. No, Lucas corrected, his mind finally connecting all the pieces. The dedication mentions where our hearts met. Regina and Katerina met as children at the Girasol boarding school in the countryside. Helena's eyes lit up at the revelation. Boarding school? Of course, Katerina always said that was where she learned the value of true friendship. We need to go inland, Lucas decided, heading for the exit. First thing tomorrow. As they left the lab, neither of them noticed the shadowy figure watching them from afar through the Institute's security cameras. The person smiled, satisfied with the pair's progress, and typed another message on his cell phone. They're almost there. Soon the truth will come out, and the Müller Empire will crumble. The morning had barely dawned when Lucas and Helena set off towards the interior of the country. The sky displayed orange tones that gradually gave way to the crystal blue typical of the Serra da Mantiqueira. The silence inside the car was interrupted only by the occasional comment about the landscape or some reflection on what they might find at the old boarding school. I called Donna Eulalia before we left, Lucas commented, breaking a long period of silence. The girls are fine. Isabel is still upset, but at least she's eating and talking to Sophia. Helena smiled slightly. It's amazing how they connected so quickly. It's almost as if they knew they were sisters, Lucas added, his eyes fixed on the winding road that went up the mountain. Do you think we should tell them the truth when this is all over? Helena asked hesitantly. Lucas sighed deeply. Isabel deserves to know, and Sophia too, but first we need to understand exactly what happened. What Katerina discovered that was so important to hide on a flash drive and protect with such secrecy. As the car gained altitude, the landscape changed. The capital's skyscrapers gave way to imposing mountains and lush valleys. The air became fresher and more fragrant, filled with the scent of pine and eucalyptus trees. The Girasol boarding school is in a more remote area, close to the border with Minas Gerais, Helena explained, checking the map on her cell phone. According to the information I found, the place was closed about 5 years ago after a series of financial problems. 5 years, Lucas murmured, shortly after Katerina left. Helena looked at him with interest. Do you think there's a connection? I don't know, but it seems like a big coincidence, he replied. Katerina studied there, as did Regina. They both maintained a strong connection to the place over the years. Regina even made regular donations to keep the boarding school running. And then, suddenly, the place closes, Helena concluded, connecting the dots. as if something had interrupted this flow of support. After nearly 3 hours of driving, they finally arrived in the interior of the country. The tourist town, known for its European architecture and cold climate, was relatively quiet that Monday. Lucas drove the car through streets lined with chalets and well-kept gardens, following the GPS directions. As they moved away from the center, the landscape became more rural and isolated. Finally, a faded sign announced Internato Girassol, Educação e Valores desde 1945. What awaited them, however, was a scene of abandonment. The wrought iron gate stood ajar, creaking in the gentle mountain wind. The stone path leading up to the main building was partially overgrown with vegetation, and the windows of the imposing Victorian building were covered in broken glass and tattered curtains dancing in the breeze. "This is heartbreaking," Helena commented as Lucas parked the car near the entrance. "It looks like no one has been here in years," Lucas agreed, noting the deteriorating state of the place that had once been a prestigious educational institution. As am I. They got out of the car. They were greeted by absolute silence, interrupted only by the distant singing of birds and the rustling of the leaves of the ancient trees that surrounded the property. "Where do we start?" Helena asked, surveying the vast complex which included the main building, a chapel, dormitories, and other secondary buildings. Lucas thought for a moment. The dedication mentioned where Katerina and Regina's hearts first met. "We need to find out what their special place was." "The chapel, perhaps," Helena suggested, "or the library. Katerina has always loved books." "Let's start with the main building and follow our intuition," Lucas decided, walking towards the staircase that led to the boarding school's imposing entrance. The main door was locked, but one of the side windows had been broken, allowing access to the interior. Careful not to hurt themselves on the broken glass, Lucas and Helena entered what had once been the main hall of the boarding school. The marble floor, now covered in dust and dry leaves blown in by the wind, still retained traces of its former elegance. On the walls, dusty portraits of former directors and benefactors silently observed the invaders. "This way," Helena called, spotting a sign indicating the direction of the library. The hallway they followed was dark, with natural light only, penetrating through dirty windows partially covered by vines. The air smelled musty and neglected. The library, when they finally found it, was a large circular space with dark wooden shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. Most of the books had been removed, probably when the boarding school closed, but a few works remained, abandoned to moths and damp. "Look at this," Lucas called, pointing to a framed photograph on the wall. "It's Katerina." The photograph showed a group of smiling teenagers wearing their boarding school uniforms. In the center, a young Katerina, her brown hair tied back in a braid, smiled shyly at the camera. Beside her, a blonde-haired girl with a confident expression had her arm around Katerina's shoulders, unmistakably Regina Hoffman. "Literature Club 1995, Helena read in the photo caption. Katerina was, 15 years old here?" "More or less," Lucas confirmed, studying the youthful face of the woman who would become his wife. She never talked much about her days at boarding school. She just said they were formative years. Helena moved closer to the photograph, examining the details. "Look at the book Katerina is holding. It's The Little Prince." Lucas frowned, in confusion. "And that's important because it was her favorite book," Helena explained. "She always carried a copy in her purse. She said the deepest truths are hidden in the simplest stories." Understanding dawned on Lucas's face. "Do you think the flash drive could be hidden in a copy of that book?" "It's possible," Helena replied, already beginning to examine the nearly empty shelves. "Let's look." After several minutes of fruitless searching, Lucas sat down in a dusty armchair, frustrated. "There's no copy of The Little Prince here. It was probably taken along with the other books when the boarding school closed." Helena, however, continued to examine the library carefully. Not necessarily. Katerina was too smart to leave something so important in an obvious place. His eyes scanned the circular room, finally stopping on a spiral staircase that led to a mezzanine. "Let's check upstairs." The mezzanine was a more intimate space with comfortable armchairs, now worn by time, positioned next to a large window that offered a stunning view of the mountains. This must have been their reading corner, Helena murmured, looking around with an almost reverent gaze. I can imagine Katerina and Regina sitting here, sharing stories and dreams. Lucas approached the window, admiring the landscape that, despite the time, remained majestic and unchanged. It really is a special place. That's when she noticed something inscribed on the windowsill, initials carved into the wood. CS plus RM, fast friends forever. Helena, look at this, he called, pointing to the inscription. Helena stepped closer, her fingers delicately tracing the letters carved into the wood. Katerina Santos and Regina Hoffman, this must have been done over 20 years ago. Lucas examined the railing more closely, noticing that one section of the wood looked slightly different from the rest. There's something here, he murmured, pressing the area. With a soft click, a small secret compartment opened in the windowsill, revealing a tiny book, a miniature version of The Little Prince. Amazing, Helena whispered, carefully, picking up the small book. When they opened it, they discovered that it was not a real book, but a disguised box. And inside it, a blue flash drive with a small drawing of a rose engraved on it, the Little Prince's rose. We found it, Lucas declared, holding the flash drive as if it were a holy relic. At this moment, the sound of footsteps echoed from the lower floor of the library. Someone had entered the building and was approaching. Lucas and Helena exchanged alarmed glances. Quickly and silently, Helena put the flash drive in her pocket and they positioned themselves behind a bookcase, watching the spiral staircase. The footsteps approached slowly, deliberately, as if the person knew the way and knew exactly where they were going. Finally, a figure appeared at the top of the stairs, an elegant middle-aged woman with perfectly arranged blonde hair and a determined expression. Regina, Helena whispered, immediately recognizing Katerina's childhood friend. You can come. Out of there, Regina Hoffman said, her voice calm and controlled. I know you're here, and I also know what you're looking for. Slowly, Lucas and Helena came out of their hiding place, staring at the newcomer with a mixture of surprise and distrust. Regina, Lucas greeted formally. I didn't expect to find you here. I could say the same, she replied, her gaze flicking between Lucas and Helena, but that would be a lie. I've been monitoring your movements ever since you started receiving the messages. Helena stepped forward, perplexed. You're the one who's been sending the messages? An enigmatic smile formed on Regina's lips. The messages were necessary to guide you here. Time is running out, and you needed to find out the truth. What truth? Lucas asked, his voice tense. The truth about what really happened to Katerina. Regina replied, her face hardening. The truth about how your company, Lucas, is slowly poisoning innocent people. The truth that Katerina discovered and that almost cost her her life. Almost? Helena repeated, her heart racing. What do you mean by that? Regina's smile widened, taking on an almost triumphant tone. Come with me. There's someone you need to see. Without waiting for an answer, Regina turned and began to descend the spiral staircase, leaving Lucas and Helena stunned, exchanging confused looks before deciding to follow her. As they left the library, following Regina through the dark halls of the abandoned boarding school, Lucas couldn't help but feel that they were about to discover something that would change their lives forever, something even more shocking than anything they had discovered so far. And in his mind, a single question echoed insistently. What? If Katerina, contrary to everything he had believed in the last 10 years, was alive, the air inside Regina's car was thick with tension and anticipation. Lucas and Helena sat silently in the back seat, occasionally exchanging glances filled with unspoken questions. The winding road took them deeper and deeper into the rural countryside, away from the city and their old boarding school. Where are you taking us, Regina? Lucas finally asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. Regina adjusted the rearview mirror, her eyes briefly meeting Lucas's. To a safe place, a refuge we built away from prying eyes and people with hidden agendas. Who are we? Helena insisted, her trembling voice betraying her anxiety. An enigmatic smile curved Regina's lips. "Patience, Helena. Soon all your questions will be answered." After another 20 minutes of driving along increasingly narrow and poorly maintained roads, they arrived at an isolated property surrounded by a dense Araucaria forest. A rustic wooden gate, almost camouflaged by the vegetation, marked the entrance. Regina stopped the car and entered a code on a discreet panel hidden among the plants. The gate swung silently open, revealing a stone path that wound through a well-kept garden to a chalet-style house with architecture that combined European and Latin elements. "Welcome to Hope Station," Regina announced as she parked in front of the house. "Hope Station?" Lucas repeated, confused. "It was the name Katerina chose," Regina explained, turning off the engine. "She always believed that hope is what keeps us fighting, even when all seems lost." Lucas's heart raced. The way Regina spoke of Katerina in the present tense. Could it be possible that his suspicions were correct? Upon entering the house, they were greeted by a warm and bright atmosphere. Large windows allowed a generous amount of natural light to enter, and the decor, although simple, conveyed a sense of comfort and serenity. "Wait here," Regina said, indicating a living room with comfortable sofas. "I'll let them know we're coming." When Regina walked away, Lucas turned to Helena. "Are you thinking the same thing as me?" "That Katerina might be alive," Helena whispered, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "That seems impossible, Lucas. We were at her funeral. We saw her coffin being lowered into the ground." "We saw a closed casket," Lucas corrected, his mind working frantically to process this possibility. "The doctor said the body's condition didn't allow for an open casket funeral due to the effects of the disease." Before they could continue their conversation, they heard footsteps approaching. Regina returned, accompanied by a middle-aged man with gray hair and a serious expression. "Lucas, Helena, this is Dr. Mauricio Fontes," introduced Regina. The name struck them both like a bolt of lightning. The doctor Helena had mentioned, the one who had disappeared shortly after Katerina was admitted. "Dr. Fontes," Helena murmured, extending her hand mechanically. "I thought you had disappeared." "Yes, that was the plan," the doctor replied, squeezing her hand. "It was necessary to protect our work and, more importantly, to protect Katerina." Lucas felt the world spin around him. "So it's true? Katerina is alive?" Dr. Fontes and Regina exchanged glances, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Yes and no," the doctor finally replied. "The Katerina you knew, Lucas, is in many ways gone. But physically, yes, she survived." "What does that mean?" Lucas asked, his voice almost cracking. "I want to see her now." Regina placed a hand on his shoulder, the gesture simultaneously comforting and restraining. "First, you need to understand what happened, and you need to be prepared for what you're about to see." Helena, who had been watching the scene in stunned silence until then, stepped forward. "Tell us everything, from the beginning." Dr. Fontes gestured to the couches. "Please sit down, it's a long and complex story." When everyone was settled, the doctor began his narrative. As you may already know, Katerina worked in communities affected by industrial pollution, especially those near the Miller Industries plant in Coubertin. What you may not know is that she began to notice an alarming pattern of rare diseases and autoimmune conditions among residents. Lucas nodded. "Helena mentioned something about that. Katerina suspected my company was releasing toxic substances that had gone undetected by regulators." "Exactly," the doctor confirmed. "Katerina didn't just suspect it, she had begun collecting evidence, water samples, soil samples, blood tests from the affected patients. Everything pointed to the presence of a specific chemical compound used in the manufacturing process of industrial solvents. But our factories follow strict environmental protocols," Lucas protested. "I have implemented changes myself to ensure this." "You did implement it," Regina intervened. "But your father, Roberto Müller, and his partner, Victor Mendez, had other plans." The mention of the company's minority partner made Lucas frown. Victor was a longtime friend of his father, an ambitious and pragmatic man who always prioritized profit above all else. What does Victor have to do with this? Lucas asked. Dr. Fontes continued. Katerina discovered internal documents showing that Victor, with his father's tacit knowledge, had ordered the modification of filtration systems at night when environmental inspections were not taking place. This allowed the plant to dump waste without proper treatment, saving millions in processing costs. Lucas felt like he had been punched in the gut. His father, the man he had always admired, had knowingly allowed his company to poison innocent people. When Katerina confronted Victor with these findings, the doctor continued, he offered her a substantial sum to keep quiet. When she refused, the threats began. And then she fell mysteriously ill, Helena concluded, connecting the dots. Regina nodded gravely. It was no coincidence. Victor arranged for Katerina to be exposed to a concentrated dose of the same toxic compound she was investigating, a substance that attacks the nervous system and causes progressive deterioration. Lucas felt a wave of nausea. The idea that someone had deliberately poisoned Katerina, the woman he loved, was almost unbearable. Why didn't she ever tell me? He asked, his voice choked with emotion. Because she suspected Victor was monitoring you, Regina explained, and she didn't want to put you or Isabel at risk. Instead, Dr. Fontes continued, Katerina came to me. I was researching experimental treatments for degenerative neurological conditions. Together, we developed a protocol that could, if not cure, at least halt the progression of the disease. But the treatment had severe side effects, Regina added, and it required complete isolation in a controlled environment. That's when we decided to fake her death, the doctor revealed. It was the only way to protect her and continue her treatment without interference from Victor or his associates. Lucas stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of deep agitation. 10 years. You kept up this charade for 10 years, while Isabel and I suffered thinking that Katerina was dead. We had no choice, Lucas, Regina replied, her voice firm but compassionate. Victor was still watching you and Isabel. If they knew Katerina was alive, everyone would be in danger. And Helena, Lucas asked, turning to the doctor, did you know this all along? Helena shook her head vehemently. No, Lucas. I was as wrong as you were. I genuinely thought Katerina had died. Only a very small circle knew the truth, Dr. Fontes explained. Me, Regina, and 2 other specialists who were helping me with my treatment. We were all sworn to secrecy. What about Sophia? Helena asked, remembering the original reason that had brought her back into Lucas's life. How does she fit into all of this? Regina smiled softly. Sophia was Katerina's last gift to the 2 of you. She knew she couldn't return to her former life, even if the treatment was successful. The neurological damage was too permanent, but she wanted to leave something of herself to the world, and especially to you, Lucas. So the whole Genesis project, Helena began. It was Katerina's idea, Regina confirmed. She wanted you and Lucas to have a child together, a part of her living on through both of you. Lucas sat back down, feeling the weight of these revelations. Why now? Why reveal all this after so long? Because Victor found out, Dr. Fontes replied gravely. Somehow he learned that Katerina was alive, and now he's determined to finish what he started. Besides, Regina added, Katerina's treatment has reached a critical point. There is a new experimental therapy that could reverse some of the neurological damage, but it needs to be administered in a specialized hospital. We can't keep her hidden here any longer. Where is she now? Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Regina exchanged a look with Dr. Fontes before answering, in the room at the end of the hall, but Lucas, prepare yourself. She's not the same person you knew. Lucas stood up, determined. I want to see her. Regina nodded and led Lucas down the hallway, with Helena and Dr. Fontes following close behind. With each step he took, Lucas felt his heart beat faster, a mixture of anxiety, hope, and fear dominating his thoughts. Regina stopped in front of a white door and knocked softly. Katerina, we have visitors for you. A weak voice answered from the other side. Come in. Regina slowly opened the door, revealing a spacious, bright room with large windows overlooking the garden. In the center, sitting in a wheelchair near the window, was Katerina. Lucas felt the air leave his lungs when he saw her. 10 years had left deep marks. Her body was thinner, her face marked by lines of suffering. Her brown hair, now streaked with gray, was tied back in a simple bun. But her eyes, those same eyes that had captivated him since their first meeting, still shone with intelligence and determination. "Lucas," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "Finally." On shaky legs, Lucas approached, kneeling, in front of the wheelchair. "Katerina," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Is it really you?" She reached out a trembling hand, gently touching his face. "Yes, my love. It's me. Or at least, what's left of me." Tears began to stream down Lucas's face as he held her hand in his. "Why? Why did you do this to us?" Katerina's eyes filled with sadness. "To protect you and Isabel. Victor wouldn't have hesitated to hurt you both to silence me. I couldn't risk it." Helena approached timidly, stopping a few steps behind Lucas. Katerina looked past him, her eyes lighting up when she saw her friend. "Helena," she called, extending her other hand. "My faithful friend, I see you finally found Lucas. And Sophia, how is our little girl?" Helena stepped closer, taking Katerina's outstretched hand. "She's wonderful, Katerina. So smart and kind, just like you." A radiant smile lit up Katerina's face. "And Isabel? She must be so grown up now." "She's 16, Lucas replied, wiping away tears. "She's stubborn and determined, just like her mother." Katerina laughed softly, a sound Lucas had thought he would never hear again. "I have so much to tell you, so much explaining to do. But first, we need to talk about Victor. He is more dangerous than ever." "How do you know he found out about you?" Lucas asked. "Because he sent someone to kill me 3 days ago," Katerina replied, her voice now grave. "If it weren't for the security Regina installed, he would have succeeded." Lucas felt an icy fury take over his being. "I'm going to finish him." "It's not that simple," Katerina warned. "Victor has powerful connections and the evidence against him is on the flash drive. Evidence I've collected over the years, including recorded confessions and internal company documents." "We found the flash drive," Helena revealed, taking it out of her pocket. "At the boarding school, exactly where you hid it." Katerina's eyes shone with approval. "I knew you could do it. Now we need to deliver this evidence to the proper authorities and ensure everyone's safety, especially the girls." "The girls!" Lucas exclaimed, suddenly alarmed. "They're at the beach house with Donna Eulalia. If Victor found out about you, he might have found out about Sophia too." Katerina's face paled. "We need to get them here immediately. It's the only safe place now." Lucas already had his cell phone in his hand, frantically dialing Donna Eulalia. After several rings without answer, the call went to voicemail. "It's not answering," he said, panic rising in his voice. "Something's wrong." At that moment, Helena's cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered it, putting it on speakerphone. "Hello, Dr. Schmidt," said a smooth, controlled male voice. "Or should I call you sister-in-law? After all, you and Lucas share a daughter, don't you?" Helena and Lucas exchanged horrified looks. "Who's speaking?" Helena demanded, although everyone in the room already suspected the answer. "Victor Mendez at your service," the voice replied, with false cordiality. "I'm calling to inform you that your lovely daughters are now under my protection. Donna Eulalia has suffered a small setback, but she'll be fine eventually." Lucas's blood ran cold in his veins. "If you touch a hair on their head, Victor..." "I swear..." "Be careful with the threats, Lucas," Victor interrupted, his tone hardening. "You're in no position to make demands. But I'm a reasonable man. I propose a simple exchange, the flash drive for your daughters." "How do we know they're okay?" Helena asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. There was a pause, and then Isabel's voice, shaky but determined, came through the receiver. "Dad, don't do what he wants. He's a terrible man. He said he was responsible for Mum having..." Isabel's voice was abruptly cut off. "Clever girl, your daughter," Victor commented coldly. "You have 1 hour to meet me at the abandoned pier in Ilhabela. Come alone with the flash drive. If you bring anyone or alert the authorities, you will never see your daughters again." The call ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Lucas turned to Katerina, his face a mask of determination and fear. "I have to go," he declared. "I can't risk the girls' lives." Katerina nodded gravely. "I know, but you won't go alone. Regina will go with you in disguise. And I will make a copy of the flash drive," Dr. Fontes added. "Even if Victor gets the original, we won't lose the evidence." Lucas knelt before Katerina again, holding her hands. "I'll bring them back, I promise, and then we can be a family again somehow." Katerina smiled sadly. "Go, my love. Save our daughters." As Lucas stood up, determined to face Victor and save Isabel and Sophia, he couldn't help but think that his world, which had already been turned upside down several times in the last few days, continued to transform in ways he could never have imagined. The truth about Katerina, the conspiracy within his own company, the discovery of another daughter, it all made for an almost surreal scenario. But one thing was clear: he would do anything to protect his family, now that he finally knew who she really was. The sun was setting over Ilhabela, painting the sky with orange and purple hues that were reflected in the calm waters of the canal. On the abandoned pier, a solitary figure waited, constantly checking his expensive wristwatch. Victor Mendez, at 63, still maintained the imposing posture and calculating gaze that had helped him build his business empire alongside the Müller family. A few meters away, hidden in the cabin of a seemingly abandoned fishing boat, Lucas watched his target. Regina was strategically positioned in a nearby cafe, disguised as an ordinary tourist, but with a clear view of the pier. Dr. Fontes and Helena had stayed in the interior of the country with Katerina, keeping in constant contact through secure phone calls. The plan was simple but risky. Lucas would find Victor and negotiate the exchange, first ensuring that the girls were safe. Regina, with the help of 2 hastily hired, trusted bodyguards, would intervene at the right moment to capture Victor and his henchmen. Lucas felt his cell phone vibrate in his pocket, Regina's signal indicating that she had visually confirmed the presence of the girls in a car parked near the pier. With that confirmation, he took a deep breath and left his hiding place, walking with firm steps towards the man who had destroyed so many lives. "Victor," Lucas called, his voice carrying a coldness that surprised even him. The older man turned, a satisfied smile forming on his shrewd face. "Lucas, my boy, punctual as always." "Where are my daughters?" Lucas demanded, ignoring the false cordiality. Victor casually pointed to a black sedan parked about 50 yards away. "They're perfectly safe in the care of my associates. Now the flash drive, please." "I want to see the girls first," Lucas insisted. "How do I know they're okay?" "So suspicious," Victor sighed, pulling a cell phone from his pocket. He made a quick call and said a few words in a low voice. Moments later, the rear window of the sedan rolled down partially, allowing Lucas to glimpse Isabel and Sophia's faces. "Satisfied?" Victor asked, putting away his phone. "Now, the flash drive." Lucas pulled the device out of his pocket, holding it up so Victor could see it. "How did you know about Sophia?" A smug smile formed on Victor's lips. "I have eyes and ears everywhere, my boy. When Helena started working at your company a few months ago, I became curious. A simple investigation revealed the existence of a daughter who was exactly the right age to have been conceived shortly before Katerina's departure. You poisoned my wife," Lucas accused, his voice shaking slightly with pent-up anger. "Why?" "She only wanted to help innocent people who were being poisoned by our company." "Business, Lucas, just business," Victor replied with disturbing ease. "Special filters and proper waste treatment would cost millions. Your wife was threatening to expose our operations, which would result in billion-dollar lawsuits and possibly the bankruptcy of the company. So you decided to silence her," Lucas concluded, feeling hatred grow inside him. "It was a pragmatic decision," Victor explained, as if he were explaining a simple business strategy. Your father understood that, even if he didn't approve of my methods. Roberto was always a visionary, but he lacked the courage to make difficult decisions. The mention of his father made Lucas frown. Did my father know about Caterina's poisoning? Victor laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Of course not. Roberto had his principles. He knew about environmental shortcuts, but he would never have agreed to extreme measures. That's why I didn't consult him. And now, Lucas asked, clutching the flash drive in his hand, after I give you this, what's to stop you from taking extreme measures with me and my daughters? A dangerous glint flashed through Victor's eyes. I'm a man of my word, Lucas. Hand over the flash drive and I'll release the girls. As for you, well, we can discuss our professional futures later. Lucas knew it was a lie. Victor would never let them go, not when they knew so much. Glancing discreetly at the coffee shop where Regina was positioned, Lucas saw the agreed-upon signal. A cup raised in a silent toast. Her men were in position. Here you go, Lucas said, holding out the flash drive. But know that this won't end well for you, Victor. Victor took the device with a triumphant smile. Always so idealistic, like your mother. That's why you'll never be the leader your father was. At that moment, a commotion erupted near the black sedan. Regina's bodyguards had approached Victor's henchmen, and a brief fight ensued. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lucas lunged at Victor, knocking him to the floor of the wooden pier. You fool, Victor shouted, trying to defend himself. You don't know who you're dealing with. The fight was brief but intense. Despite his age, Victor was surprisingly strong and agile. At one point, he managed to land a blow to Lucas's face, forcing him to retreat. Victor tried to escape, running towards a boat anchored near the pier, but Lucas caught up with him, grabbing him by the sleeve of his jacket. It's over, Victor, Lucas said breathlessly. The police are on their way, with search warrants for all your computers and property. The flash drive you have is a copy. The original is already with the authorities. Victor's face twisted into an expression of fury and despair. You don't understand, Lucas. There are powerful people involved in this, people who will not hesitate to destroy you and your family. I'm not afraid, Lucas replied firmly. Not anymore. Sirens began to sound in the distance, announcing the arrival of the authorities. Regina ran towards the sedan, where the security guards had already subdued Victor's henchmen and freed Isabel and Sophia. Father, Isabel shouted, running towards Lucas as soon as she saw him. Sophia followed close behind, her face pale but determined. As two police officers approached to arrest Victor, Lucas hugged the two girls, feeling indescribable relief. Are you guys okay? He asked, examining them anxiously for injuries. We are, Isabel replied, although her voice trembled slightly. But Donna Eulalia... She's in the hospital, but she'll be fine, Regina assured, joining them. I've already confirmed with the doctor in charge. Sophia looked at Lucas with a curious expression, as if trying to decipher a complex riddle. That man, he said you're my father. Is it true? Lucas felt his heart sink. This was not how he had planned to reveal the truth to the girl. Crouching down to her eye level, he replied softly, Yes, Sophia, it is true. And there is so much more I need to tell you, both of you. Isabel, who had heard Sophia's question, looked between her father and the girl with an expression of shock. What? How is this possible? It's a long and complicated story, Regina interjected gently. And there's someone very special waiting to tell it to you in person. Who? Isabel asked, confused. Lucas and Regina exchanged meaningful glances. Let's go inland, Lucas said finally. There's someone there you need to meet. The trip, from Ilhabela to the interior of the country, was made in an atmosphere of restrained expectation. Lucas and Regina had explained to the girls only the bare minimum, that Victor had tried to harm the Müller family out of greed, and that he was now in police custody. The most important revelation awaited at Estação Esperança. When they finally arrived at the isolated property in the middle of the mountains, it was already night. The cabin was completely lit up, like a welcoming beacon in the darkness of the mountains. Dr. Fontes greeted them at the door, his face showing relief when he saw that everyone was okay. "They're waiting in the living room," he told Lucas, leading the way. Helena was sitting next to Katerina's wheelchair, both of them with anxious expressions that turned to joy as they saw the group enter. "You did it," Helena exclaimed, standing up to hug Sophia. But Isabel had stopped in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the woman in the wheelchair. For a long moment, no one moved or spoke. Time seemed suspended as mother and daughter saw each other for the first time in 10 years. "Mommy?" Isabel finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Katerina stretched out her trembling arms, tears streaming freely down her face. "My girl, my Isabel." With a sob, Isabel ran into her mother's arms, falling to her knees in front of the wheelchair and burying her face in Katerina's lap. The teenager's sobs echoed in the silent room as Katerina stroked her hair, murmuring words of love and comfort. Sophia watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and excitement, her small hand holding Helena's tightly. Lucas approached them, gently placing a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Sophia," he called softly, "there's someone very special I want you to meet." The girl looked at him with those eyes that she now recognized as so similar to her own. Slowly, Lucas led her to the wheelchair where Katerina and Isabel were hugging each other. Katerina looked up, her eyes meeting Sophia's. A radiant smile lit her grief-stricken face. "Hello, Sophia," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm Katerina, your birth mother." Sophia blinked, absorbing the information with the surprising maturity she had always demonstrated. "But, Mommy, Helena is your mother too," Katerina explained gently. "She brought you into the world and raised you with all the love she could, but you were conceived with a part of me and a part of Lucas." Helena approached, kneeling beside Sophia. "Remember all the times I told you about my special friend, the one who was like a sister to me? It was Katerina, and she loved you before you even existed." Sophia looked from Helena to Katerina, and then to Lucas and Isabel, who were now watching her expectantly. It was a lot of information to process at once, but instead of shrinking back, the girl took a step forward, approaching Katerina. "Can I give you a hug?" she asked shyly. With tears in her eyes, Katerina nodded, opening her arms again. Sophia approached cautiously and gently hugged the woman she had just discovered was her biological mother. Isabel, still kneeling beside the chair, wrapped them both in her embrace, forming a perfect circle. Lucas and Helena exchanged emotional glances. Somehow, after so much suffering and separation, the family Katerina had imagined was finally reunited, not in the way either of them had planned, but in a way that, surprisingly, felt right. 6 months had passed since the revelations in Tinoin, the interior of the country. Summer had given way to autumn, and the mountains around Hope Station displayed a palette of warm colors that contrasted with the crystal blue of the sky. Life had changed dramatically for everyone involved. Victor Mendes was in jail, awaiting trial on multiple charges, including attempted murder and environmental crimes. The evidence on the flash drive, combined with Lucas and Katerina's statements, had built a solid case against him. Müller Industries was undergoing a radical transformation under Lucas's new leadership. The Coubertin plant had been temporarily closed for a complete overhaul of its waste treatment systems. A compensation fund had been set up to help families affected by the pollution, and a partnership with the Humanitarian Medical Institute ensured specialized care for the most serious cases. At Estação Esperança, now a permanent residence, for the extended family, Katerina was undergoing experimental treatment under the supervision of Dr. Fontes. The results were promising. She had regained some of her motor coordination, and her speech was stronger and clearer. Although doctors were cautious about promising a full recovery, Katerina's quality of life improved with each passing day. Helena had resumed her medical career, accepting a position at a hospital in the interior of the country that allowed her to remain close to her family while doing the work she loved. Her mother, Donna Aurora, after receiving proper treatment financed by Lucas, had recovered and lived with them on the property, helping to care for the girls. Isabel and Sophia had developed a relationship that transcended the complicated circumstances of their parentage. As sisters and friends, they shared not only genes but dreams, secrets, and the unique experience of rediscovering the meaning of family. Isabel now attended the local high school, while Sophia was homeschooled with private tutors, preparing to eventually join her sister at the same school. On a particularly pleasant afternoon, the family gathered in the property's spacious garden. Katerina, in her adapted wheelchair, watched with a serene smile as Isabel helped Sophia with a science homework. Helena and Donna Aurora prepared a snack at the picnic table, and Regina, who had become a frequent visitor, chatted animatedly with Dr. Fontes about the advances in treatment. Lucas approached Katerina, sitting on the bench next to her chair. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her contemplative look. Katerina smiled, her eyes shining with a peace that had been absent for so long. "How life takes surprising turns. A year ago, I was resigned to living out the rest of my days in hiding, watching you from afar. Now we're all here united. It's more than I ever dared to dream." Lucas took her hand, caressing it gently. Despite all the physical changes Katerina had undergone, the love he felt for her remained intact, perhaps even stronger, tempered by the separation and the reunion. "I have a surprise for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "A new treatment has been approved in the United States. Experts believe it can reverse up to 60% of neurological damage." Katerina's eyes filled with tears of hope. "When?" "In 2 months," Lucas replied. "We'll all go together. Everything's already arranged." "Everyone?" Katerina repeated, looking at the girls, Helena and Donna Aurora. "We're a family now," Lucas said with conviction. "An unconventional family, sure, but a family nonetheless, and families stick together." At that moment, the girls approached, curious about the conversation. "What's going on?" asked Isabel, always attentive to the adults' emotional expressions. Katerina held out her hand, inviting them to come closer. "Your father just gave me some wonderful news. We're all going to the United States for treatment that can help me get even better." "Does this mean you'll be able to walk again?" Sophia asked, her eyes shining with childlike hope. "Maybe," Katerina replied honestly. "The doctors can't promise, but there's a good chance. Anyway, what really matters is that we'll be together." Isabel, now 17 and on the verge of adulthood, looked around at the diverse group they had become. Who would have thought that trip to the beach would end like this? She said with a smile. "Fate has mysterious ways," Helena observed, joining them with a tray of lemonade. Lucas raised his glass in a toast. "To the family we chose and the family that chose us, and to new beginnings." As everyone raised their glasses, united in a moment of celebration and hope, the late afternoon sun bathed the garden in a golden light, as if nature itself blessed this new chapter in their intertwined lives. Regina captured the moment with her camera, an image that contrasted sharply with the black and white photograph that had guided Lucas and Helena to the boarding school. That old image represented the past, with its secrets and pain. This new one captured the present and pointed to a bright future, built on revealed truths and bonds strengthened by love and acceptance. And so, as the day drew to a close in the Kiu mountains of the interior of the country, the Müller family, now expanded and redefined, found their own new beginning, proving that even from the most unlikely and painful circumstances, something beautiful and lasting can blossom.